Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today, we're covering the real best wizard in Baldur's Gate 3. This is an update video to my previous video of the same name, in which we're going to talk about the secret best wizard build in Baldur's Gate. Now, of course, it's no secret that there are 8 schools of magic available to wizards, divination, conjuration, and so on. But there's actually a secret 9th school available in Baldur's Gate 3, and that secret 9th school is Cleric. Because of how Baldur's Gate spellcasting works, a wizard can take only a single level in wizard and still have full wizard spellcasting if they have levels in other spellcasting classes. So we can take levels in Cleric and a single level in Wizard and get all of the power of a Cleric and a Wizard combined into a single character, making this character a fully featured Wizard with all of the power of any Wizard build, alongside all of the power of a Cleric build and the superior armor, weapons, and hit points, and so on that Clerics get in addition to all of the goodies from Wizard spellcasting. This means we get the best offensive, defensive, and support spells in the game all rolled into a single class. Obviously, doubling the power of a character is incredibly strong, making this an incredibly versatile and powerful addition to any party. Before I begin, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Ken Porter for the $20 donation, and Christos Alexikos, Nicholas Lastarza, Falk, and Sean Swafford for becoming channel members. Thank you so much, my friends. I really appreciate the support. It really means a lot. Alright, let's build a cleric wizard. Or clizzard, I would call it, if that wouldn't get me demonetized on YouTube. I'm using Gale as the example character here, since this is functionally a wizard build, but of course this would also fit for Shadowheart due to the preponderance of cleric levels, and if you're building this as a custom character, what race you pick mostly doesn't matter. We have all of the proficiencies that we need from our cleric levels, so racial proficiencies aren't that important to this build, but Halfling in particular is very good for us because it will help us maintain concentration on spells, and Wood Elf or Half Wood Elf for the bonus movement speed, Dwergar to remain invisible outside of combat, or Githyanki for the once per day Misty Step, all make this build just a little bit easier, so those would be my recommendations from a power level perspective. So right at level 1, we actually have a really interesting decision to make, and that's which of the 2 classes we're going to take first. There's a lot that actually goes into this, and basically the question is, are we going to use our wizard spells for combat or our cleric spells for combat, and the other spells we're going to use for defense and support. In general, wizard spells are better for offense, and cleric spells are better for defense, so we want to build our wizard spells as our offensively oriented spells. That fits very well because we're only going to be able to prepare and cast 6 wizard spells by the end of the game, but you don't need that many combat spells. You need a few control spells, and you need a few damage spells. So if we build our intelligence to be the higher of our 2 attributes, then we can use our cleric spells to cast spells that don't require saves or hit chance, and gain the awesome utility and power of cleric spellcasting, and use our wizard spells for our damaging spells in order to gain all of the incredible control and damage that wizards output. What that means is that at first level we want to take cleric. The reason for this is that Baldur's Gate has an odd quirk with how it handles save DCs for spells that are cast from items and scrolls. It uses the casting stat of whatever class you took the first level in most recently. So we want to take Wizard as our second level so that our scrolls and items use intelligence, which is also going to be our combat statistic. That means we start as a cleric so that we can take lower wisdom and use all of the awesome utility from cleric and all of the awesome combat power from wizard. For our cleric domain, we again have an interesting choice. I think there's really 3 choices here, but honestly any of the cleric domains could fit very well, so if there's one that you want to explore with this build, it will honestly be extremely powerful. The 3 main choices, though, I think are life domain for a more supporting version of the build, light domain for a more defensively oriented version of the build with the warding flare reaction that'll make this character extremely difficult to kill, or tempest domain for a more offensive version with maximized lightning damage, giving you an incredible amount of burst damage for encounters where that's most efficient. I'm going to go with tempest domain for this build because the wizard, one of the benefits of having offensive wizard spellcasting is access to great lightning damage spells, and Tempest Domain, of course, takes incredible advantage of those spells, so it synergizes extremely well with what we're doing here, but any of the cleric domains could fit reasonably well and be totally fine for this character. For our cantrip selection here, remember that we don't want combat cantrips from cleric, because we're going to be taking low wisdom and high intelligence, so we're going to pick up utility cantrips. In this case, we're going to grab Guidance, Resistance, and Light. This gives us 3 of the best utility cantrips in the game. An alternative option is to take Blade Ward for damage resistance. We can pick that up later once we have a little bit more defensive capability if we want it. But these 3 will serve us the best in terms of utility cantrips in the early game. Of course, we have to take Mystra as our deity. It would be a huge throw not to do that because of the theming of this character, and this is a Gale build. And then for our ability score selection, we're going to take a pretty standard wizard ability score split. So we're going to take 16 intelligence and 16 in constitution, as well as 14 dexterity, and 12 wisdom. We don't need that much higher wisdom because we will get plenty of prepared cleric spells just by taking levels in cleric, and we're not going to be taking cleric spells that rely on our wisdom for save DC or hit chance, so we don't need to have particularly high wisdom in order to gain the advantages of cleric. For our skill selection for this character, honestly what skills we pick mostly does not matter for this character. We won't be the party face for the party since we're taking 8 charisma, and we can't really afford to raise that. You could build this as a party face by dropping your constitution a little bit, but you would be sacrificing some mechanical ability, so better to have another character in your party fill that role, and you probably won't be the lockpicking character either, so what skills you take, mostly not that relevant. If you are playing as Gale and thus have the additional human skill, you can take acrobatics in order to be slightly harder to shove, but other than that, your skill selection mostly will not matter that much for this character. That's it at level 1, let's move on to level 2. At character level 2, we are immediately going to branch out and take our level of Wizard. This gets us access to our combat cantrips, which are going to use our intelligence, and also to the scroll scribing feature of Wizard, letting us learn almost every Wizard spell in the entire game. The way that Wizard spell scribing works in Baldur's Gate is it uses your caster level rather than your Wizard level to determine the level of spell that you can scribe. So if we have 1 level of Wizard and we can scribe level 1 spells. If we have 1 level of Wizard and 2 levels of Cleric, we can scribe level 2 spells. The normal level that you'd be able to learn is a level 3 caster. So with only a single level of Wizard and 11 or 10 or 11 levels of Cleric, we'll be able to learn 6 level Wizard spells and then 6 level Cleric spells at the same time. It wasn't clear when the game launched whether this was intentional. It's not the way it works in tabletop under most rules interpretations. There's some ambiguity there, but very few tables will play with this version of the rules. But after a year and a half of the game being like this, I'm quite confident in saying this is the intentional design of Baldur's Gate, and they want you to be able to use all of the wizard spells and all of the spells from another class in the same character, so might as well take advantage of that and get 2 characters for the price of 1. For our cantrip selection here, we are going to take Ray of Frost as our primary combat cantrip. This is an extremely powerful cantrip that does the most damage of any cantrip in the game except for Eldritch Blast, because you can double its damage with the wet condition, and also freeze puddles of water, which causes enemies to fall over, slow enemy movement speed, incredible utility, and awesome damage. We're also going to grab Firebolt. This is slightly higher damage if the enemy isn't wet, but also lets us set things on fire, which has a tremendous amount of utility throughout the game. And we're going to take Minor Illusion. Minor Illusion can be used to group enemies out of combat, so that then you can blast them with one of your very powerful AoE wizard spells. For our spell selection at this level, of course what spells we learn is going to be determined in part by what scrolls we've found. Most of our wizard spells are going to come from scrolls, and we're going to scribe every wizard scroll that we find in order to get the maximum number of powerful wizard spells available. But a good default selection is something along the lines of Enhanced Leap and Long Strider. These powerful ritual spells will be excellent to buff up your party as well as yourself. And for combat spells, Chromatic Orb is the best level 1 combat spell, giving you access to all sorts of damage types, as well as on-command ice surfaces to knock enemies prone and cost them multiple turns. Magic Missile, which doesn't use our intelligence, but is still just an excellent spell to have. Shield as a great defensive option, and Grease to kind of round things out for a big AoE debuff to a large group of enemies. We won't be able to prepare all of these. We only have 1 wizard level, so we'll only be able to prepare 4 spells at this point. But depending on whether the rest of our party has Enhanced Leap and Long Strider, we may choose not to prepare these. Ignore the higher level spells. These are just ones that Gale has learned from scrolls as we are discussing this, as will be the case for this build in this save. But a good default selection is something like Chromatic Orb, Magic Missile, Shield, and Long Strider, giving you access to a wide variety of options, both in combat and out of combat, especially in addition to our cleric spells. Alright, that's it for level 2. Let's move on to level 3. At character level 3, we're going to take our second level of Cleric, getting level 2 in Tempest Cleric, which gives us access to Destructive Wrath. This means that we can now maximize the damage of lightning spells, including Chromatic Orb that we got at level 1. We can maximize lightning or thunder damage on it, usually lightning because lightning can then be doubled with the wet condition for even more damage. So we just get enemies wet and then blast them, as in all of the finest fanfiction. The Destructive Wrath gives us incredible offensive capabilities at this level, and also because we're now a 3rd level caster with a level of Wizard, we can learn level 2 Wizard spells, including powerful utility spells like Misty Step, and powerful offensive spells like Cloud of Daggers, Scorching Ray, and Hold Person. So keep an eye out for those especially, though of course, if you're playing this character, you're probably just going to want to play Pokemon and catch every Wizard spell in the game in order to have the maximum amount of potential utility that you can have. For prepared spells at this level with Cleric, the most important spells to have access to are Healing Word and Sanctuary. This gives us 2 awesome bonus action spells, 1 defensive and 1 sort of emergency. If an ally goes down, you can bring them back to life with Healing Word. You can also just keep a party member alive with Sanctuary. And since wizards don't have incredible bonus action spells, this gives us even more power in terms of our efficiency in combat. We can now use our bonus action to cast a super powerful spell and our main action to cast a super powerful spell as well. The third spell that we have here is going to depend a little bit. If you're using a lot of lightning damage, then Create Water never goes amiss. But Bless is also great utility for your whole party, so you can always use this. And this will give you a really good setup for defensive and utility spells, while Wizard is providing the offensive firepower. At character level 4, we get access to our 3rd level of Cleric, and get 2nd level Cleric spells, in addition to the 2nd level Wizard spells we already have. One of the awesome things about this character build is every single level we get access to a new spell level. So we're always, no matter what level we are, getting new spells available to use. On even levels, we're getting new cleric spells. On odd levels, we're getting new wizard spells, and also increasing the total power level of our character to a higher spell level. And so we will always have new options at every level up because we're combining 2 characters into 1. That means that this character is always constantly progressing and hitting new power spikes. For our prepared spells at this level, we're actually going to keep these 3 spells that we prepared at level 1 Cleric. Level 2 Cleric has a lot of more offensively focused spells, but we can still add a few awesome utility spells. We can use Lesser Restoration for cases where we need that. We now have access to prepare that. And for a more general usage spell, we have Aid, which we can cast on our whole party, just to make them more survivable until their next long rest. Often, this character will be a little strapped for spell slots, because we have great utility and great offense. So if you have another character that can cast Aid, or if you want to use a camp caster for that, then you don't need to do this from this character, but it's an option you have available. Another one that's worth mentioning as well is Spiritual Weapon. Although the Spiritual Weapon uses your wisdom for your attack and for its hit chance and damage, it doesn't matter that much because the main usage of Spiritual Weapon is as a bonus action cast that blocks doorways and draws enemy fire. So you can still use Spiritual Weapon as a powerful combat option, even though it won't be that great at hitting and dealing damage on this character, since that's not the main use of the spell. At character level 5, we get our 4th level of Cleric, and of course are now a 5th level spellcaster, meaning we get access to 3rd level wizard spells that we can learn from scrolls. Some really important wizard spells show up at this level. The most important for us as a Tempest Cleric include Lightning Bolt, which we can maximize, so that increases our damage output dramatically because we now have a really powerful AoE lightning damage spell. We can get enemies wet and then hit them with it for an enormous amount of damage. Hypnotic Pattern, very important as well, can be learned from a scroll and lets you control an entire encounter. Obviously, 3rd level spells are where a lot of characters get their massive power spikes because 3rd level spells are a dramatic increase in power level compared to 1st and 2nd level spells and will remain your mainstay combat spells throughout the game. So getting access to those already at level 5 is great for this character and lets you use the most powerful spells as early as possible. For our cantrips here, we're going to go ahead and take Blade Ward. This lets us, if things go really wrong and we're surrounded by enemies, it gives us a defensive option, and this is just the most useful utility, where we don't have a lot of use for Thaumaturgy, so Blade Ward can protect us in some circumstances, or if we have a lot of temporary HP from an allied buff or something, this can make it go a little further. You probably won't cast this that often, but it's a nice utility or emergency spell to have as backup if the circumstances call for it. For our feat here, we're just going to go for an ability improvement and boost our intelligence up to 18. Another option in honor mode especially is to take alert. If you have a lot of improved save DC items and other characters need your improved initiative items, you may want to take alert on this character and put the save DC items on it to boost our intelligence save rather than actually leveling our intelligence. Either works pretty well, but in general, you're going to be best off just leveling your intelligence. This character will benefit from initiative gear pretty heavily, but there's enough of that in the game that we can find that. At character level 6, we get to add 3rd level cleric spells alongside our 3rd level wizard spells, giving us even more powerful options with our cleric spellcasting. For our utility spells at this level, even though it uses our wisdom, Spirit Guardians is still a powerful combat spell. We might want to use it. If enemies pass the saving throw, they still take half damage, so you can still use Radiating Orb gear on this character if you want to. If you're doing that, then Spirit Guardians is the best way to do that. If you aren't doing that, then you're going to want utility spells that don't have saving throws associated with them. Things like Mass Healing Word to bring up your whole party, and you can use the buff on heal items very effectively with this character. Animate Dead for a pile of summons. This ends up being one of the absolute best summoners in the game, because you get both the powerful cleric and wizard summons, so you can use both of these at once. Animate Dead helps play into that theme and gives you a nice day-long buff to go alongside your powerful combat spells. Any of those options work, but this is my recommended, unless you're using Radiating Orbs, in which case you should grab Spirit Guardians. At level 7, we gain our 6th level of Cleric, getting access to Thunderbolt Strike, letting us push enemies around. This is very useful because the way that this works in Baldur's Gate is any lightning damage or thunder damage that counts as coming from this character will allow you to push an enemy. If you electrify a water surface, which we're going to be able to create a lot of because we have Create Water and we're throwing around a lot of lightning damage, the Thunderbolt Strike effect will go off when enemies take damage from walking on that electrified water surface. This lets you ping-pong enemies all over the battlefield, costing them a ton of movement, and also just constantly repositioning them and doing damage to them. So is an amazing crowd control effect, as long as you're putting up electrified water or just electrified fields on the ground. We also, of course, get access to 7th level spellcasting or 4th level wizard spells for even more powerful offensive spell effects. Things like Wall of Fire that can win entire encounters are now available to us. For our prepared cleric spells at this level, nothing has changed, but we also just have more powerful cleric spellcasting features and more powerful wizard spells available. And once again, at level 8, we get to add yet another new level of spellcasting to our arsenal with 4th level cleric spells. We get Freedom of Movement, which is an awesome utility spell to have, especially as a domain spell from Tempest Cleric. Freedom of Movement gives you a great panic button if an ally gets stunned. You won't want to cast this at the beginning of the day. Instead, you're going to be using it only if an ally gets stunned, and then you still do get the benefits that last all day from it, but mostly this is as a panic button to break an ally out of a stun, and it's a great backup option to have. For our prepared spells at this level, we're going to add in Guardian of Faith, because this is an incredible utility spell. Again, does not require our wisdom to be effective, and lets you just block doorways with its gigantic body, as well as doing extremely powerful damage output. 60 damage for a 4th level spell is great. If you combine it with Aid, you can heal it and get a 4th attack out of it for 80 damage from a 4th level spell, which is a great ratio. You can then take lower level utility spells. Things like Shield of Faith or Protection from Evil and Good can be useful in some circumstances, so you might want to pick up one of these as just a utility option. Remember, our main combat spells are coming from Wizard, so these are mostly for out-of-combat utility, healing, and defensive options for our party. At level 9, we once again improve our access to wizard spellcasting, and also, of course, get a second feat, which lets us max out our intelligence for the maximum save DCs and hit chance with our wizard spells. Important wizard spells at this level, there actually aren't that many at level 5 that we really care about, but Cone of Cold is a pretty good offensive spell. Mostly we're going to be using our 5th level spell slots, though, to upcast lower level spells for more damage, and higher AoE or power level, depending on the spells available. Of course, as always, what spells we are looking for is going to depend on which spells we're using in combat. We'll talk about that in a second, but we want to collect as many wizard spells as possible to have the most combat options available for use in different encounters. The Divine Strike action from Tempest Cleric, not particularly impactful. We won't be making melee attacks with this character that frequently, but of course just getting to 8th level Cleric and increasing our intelligence is going to make our spellcasting and damage that much better. At character level 10, we get to add 5th level Cleric spells to our 5th level Wizard spells, gaining even more utility and power. Now, 5th level Cleric spells don't have a ton that we're that excited by. In general, the 5th level spells are focused on damage dealing, which is not what we're using our Cleric spells for, but a couple spells are pretty useful to us. Firstly, Destructive Wave is actually not that bad, even though it's an offensively oriented spell and uses our Wisdom for the save DC. It still does half damage even if enemies pass the save, and is a big AoE that doesn't hit our allies, and is always prepared, so we don't have to spend a resource on preparing it because it's a domain spell, so we'll always have access to this. This means if there's a bunch of enemies at low health, so that the half damage will guaranteed kill them, or is very likely to kill them, you can use Destructive Wave for a bunch of guaranteed AoE damage, without hitting your allies if your allies and enemies are all mixed together, which can happen a lot since this character is very good at summoning. So Destructive Wave has a lot of utility, even as a damage dealing spell from Cleric. For our prepared spells from 5th level, there aren't really that many that we actually want. We're probably not going to be casting a lot of these Cleric spells, or these 5th level Cleric spells, because they mostly have save DCs or do damage. The most powerful 5th level Cleric spell is Flame Strike, so for the most part we're going to go back and grab utility spells from lower levels, things like Prayer of Healing for out-of-combat healing. Spiritual Weapon can be useful at this level. At this point, you should have a good sense of what your party needs in terms of support, and should be able to pick spells that are appropriate to what your character actually needs to bring to the table. At level 11, of course, the main attraction here is that we get 6th level wizard spells. This lets us learn the game-winning options like Chain Lightning, which is going to be our main damage-dealing spell, Globe of Invulnerability, which will just absolutely instantly win some encounters that are damage races, and other extremely powerful spells like Conjure Elementals for the 6th level Myrmidon summons, so that this character can summon all of the best summons in the game, I guess except the Druid summon, but for the most part we get all of the best summons out there. For our cantrips at this level, unfortunately no True Strike available to us, so we'll grab Thaumaturgy so we can yell at people better, and then move on to level 12. At character level 12, we get our 11th Cleric level, which adds 6th level cleric spells alongside our 6th level wizard spells. Now, of course, for most of the time, your character will only have one 6th level spell slot, but there's a lot of ways to refresh your 6th level spell slot in Baldur's Gate. That means that the day-long buffs that we get from 6th level cleric can be incredibly powerful and can be added to our 6th level wizard spells to be used in combat. The most important of these are Hero's Feast, which is an extremely powerful day-long buff. Every party should have Hero's Feast running if possible. Either you cast this from a camp caster that never leaves camp, or you have one of your characters cast it. The immunity to fear is really good in a bunch of late game encounters, and advantage on wisdom saves is awesome. And then Planar Ally lets us have the Planar Ally summon in addition to the Myrmidon summon for the two most powerful summons in the game, just giving this character incredible summon access and some of the most powerful options available. Of course, this means refreshing your spell slots a couple times, but our gear will allow us to do that, and then we'll still be able to cast extremely powerful 6th level spells from Wizard for our damaging or encounter winning options. Our last spell here, again, we're just going to go back and pick up a utility spell, just anything that we think we might need from lower levels. We actually should have had Create or Destroy Water prepared a little earlier. I should have slotted that in one of the prepared spell sections earlier on, just to make sure that we had that available. So we should have picked that up a bit earlier and can grab it now. All right, that is our wizard build, the best wizard in Baldur's Gate 3. Obviously, this looks like a cleric build, but don't be fooled. This is actually the 9th school of wizard magic. And of course, we can make it even more powerful using appropriate items, picking the right spells, and grabbing the right elithid powers. So let's talk about that. For items for this character, there's really 3 categories of items that we're looking at in order to maximize our power level. The first of these is going to be items that increase our initiative. With only 14 dexterity, you could take 16 to start with, but I like 16 constitution because this character will be concentrating on spells a lot, so we want to maintain concentration on our spells. But with only 14 dexterity, initiative can be an issue, especially in honor mode, so this character definitely wants items that increase our initiative. Items like the Fistbreaker Helm that give us a boost to initiative just let us go first, and since this character has such powerful combat capabilities with both control and damage spells, going first will let us shut down encounters before they start. The second, conveniently encapsulated with the Fistbreaker Helm as well, is items that increase our spell save DC. This is still a wizard build, so we're going to be using spells that have save DCs in order to shut down enemies or deal damage to them. Increasing those as much as possible makes our spell casting much more effective. So items like this give us initiative and save DC increases, making our spell casting better. Since we have shield proficiency and heavy armor proficiency, Thetheric's shield is the best in slot shield for us, increasing our spell save DC and also giving us increased armor class. And we can use heavy armor. Stuff like the Dwarven Splint Mail is really good because this increases our hit points and also makes us even better at concentrating on spells, because of the additional constitution that we get. So in general, I think this is the best option. Later in the game, you might want to swap to a save DC increasing item like the Robe of the Weave, alongside something like alongside Mage Armor in order to still have decent armor class. But this character can get very respectable armor class. 21 plus access to the shield spell is not bad at all for a spellcaster, and that's without any other AC gear, just with this very basic setup because of our armor and weapon proficiencies. We also, of course, want ways to refresh our spell slots. Things like the Spellcrux Amulet are incredible for that, because this character has all the best 6th level spells in the game, so we want to be able to cast them. The best in slot weapon for us is, of course, as with every caster, Mark a Heshkir, but even better for this character because our 6th level spells are so valuable, we want to be able to refresh those spell slots, and Mark a Heshkir does that. And the ability to cast Chain Lightning and then maximize it with Tempest Cleric is, of course, ridiculously strong, letting us do 20d6 damage maximized for just 120 guaranteed damage with Chain Lightning. Because we can double the damage, or 20d8 damage, excuse me, for 160 guaranteed damage, because we can double the damage with wet, in order to deal 160 guaranteed damage to multiple enemies, when we maximize the damage of Chain Lightning with Tempest Cleric. And Markaheshkir lets us cast that once per short rest, so of course is going to have tremendous synergy with this character, and it'll use our intelligence since we took Wizard as our second level. The other thing that we're looking for with this character is wizard spells. We want to collect, of course, as many scrolls as we can. We want to learn all the wizard spells if possible, but we really want to have a good selection of combat spells so that we can prepare the most dangerous wizard spells. Some that are really worth keeping an eye out for include Hypnotic Pattern, which is the best control spell in the game, and Lightning Bolt, which will be our mainstay damage spell for most of the game. In the late game, we still want Chain Lightning as a known spell, although we'll be casting this from Markaheshkir a lot of the time. Having it actually known by the character is still very good. Globe of Invulnerability is critical for any caster and could just win you any encounter where enemies attack you for damage, which is almost all of them, including all of the most difficult encounters in the game. So Scroll of Invulnerability, just a game-winning spell. Wall of Fire just wins certain encounters on its own, so I would definitely recommend picking this up. And then for the early game, Cloud of Daggers is a great offensive spell as well. Misty Step, excellent utility that every character should have access to. Finally, this character can benefit a lot from the items that let you replace your attributes with other attributes. This is a great candidate for the Gloves of Dexterity, giving you higher initiative and armor class, especially if you're not in heavy armor. So the Gloves of Dexterity are awesome for this character, which also doesn't have a really important glove otherwise, so it's a great candidate for the Gloves of Dexterity that can let you increase your wisdom to have higher save DCs if you do cast Destructive Wave or Spirit Guardians, and overall just more cleric spells prepared. You can also use the Warped Headband of Intellect in the early game. Later on, you're going to want to improve your intelligence with ASIs, and you'll want to swap out of the Warped Headband, but you can use this for the first few levels in order to have offensive cleric spellcasting alongside offensive wizard spellcasting, so that's yet another option available to you. Overall, this character's itemization is really simple. It's initiative, save DC, and then just the best wizard spells that you want to learn from scrolls, and you will be very well set up to win with the best wizard in Baldur's Gate 3. Alright, my friends, hope you've enjoyed this video. This is a fun one that takes advantage of a unique mechanic for Baldur's Gate in order to combine two of the most powerful characters in the game into a single character, and is a very powerful addition to any honor mode party. If you have enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a comment and hit the like button. Helps me out a ton with the algorithm, so I appreciate you taking the time to do that. And of course you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 builds and other strategy game analysis. Cheers folks, and I will catch you next time.